Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Ogden-Campbell and this is my applied assignment. Please bear with me. I was able to download this tool to record, but I am having issues on finding how to get it recorded. My camera won't attach to it, but um, thank you for being here. My presentation is called Understanding Tourette Syndrome Through a Family Lens. This applied assignment from the beginning, I knew when we talked about what it should be, I really wanted to choose my family, and because my daughter this year was recently diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, and I found this very personal for me, and it's transformed how I think about inclusion, support, and advocacy, especially with taking this class. I have just a bigger, broader picture of what that truly is, and it makes me even want to advocate more for all of this. But in this applied assignment, we're going to talk about, how we as a family are going through this journey with her. And we'll also talk about, the educational, social equity and access and support in this. So going into this project, I wanted to understand how Tourette's affects children socially and emotionally, both at home and school. I wanted to explore how schools and families can work together to provide real support. This process, again, just has become more than just research. It definitely is becoming a reflection of our family's journey and how we're learning and growing together. As you can see, I had interviewed William. He is the father of Bliss, Bliss. That is my daughter's name. Oh, back to the last slide. That is my picture of my family and my daughter, Bliss, who was diagnosed with Tourette's. I interviewed my husband because as parents, we are learning how to adapt and advocate for her. And it was just interesting to see his side of his journey, or our journey, or his journey, I guess, being a parent with a child with a disability. Background knowledge he and I have none. We have just the general idea of what Tourette's was, but it is more than we thought it was originally. So this is kind of just me was able to sit down and finally just pick his brain about our daughter's diagnosis. So the course materials I use, I kind of went through a few. I feel like every one of them, especially the last ones, the last modules, have been like kind of really honing into our particular area. So I used the Carlson and Witchy. They studied how college students' attitudes towards people with disabilities change after exposure to inclusion education. I picked that one because it makes me wonder what if we're able to start that kind of education in elementary school. I also have picked The Family Life Goes On Disability in Contemporary Families, Journal of Family Studies. And then I kind of just picked a few that kind of best relate to our story and our daughter. So parenting interventions for children with tic disorders, and then the diagnostic and therapeutic journey of Tourette syndromes. I have attached if you guys want to read, I did have attached the links as well. All right, so the evidence of our interview, I have attached our Google Docs that has all the questions and his answers for the interview. And then on the right, as you can see, our text messages. Again, I know he is my husband, but he is also the closest person I know that has a disability or a parent. Even though we have two children together, it's just nice to sit and pick again his brain. And, I've never really have asked like, oh my gosh, how are you doing? What do you think of all of this kind of thing? So it was really interesting to just sit down and academically have a conversation with him about our daughter's disability. All right, so new learning. I used my evidence was the undergraduate students' attitudes towards individuals with disability. Inclusion. So in the article, it emphasizes that inclusion is more than just being physically in the classroom. It's about emotional safety, understanding, and connection. So inclusion must be emotional and social, not just academic. At school, her teacher allows calming tools like fidgets, showing, just showing basic accommodations to her needs. Um, so, uh, at the start of this, when we tell people if they notice her tics, we were the ones advocating for her, but we are making sure that she can advocate for herself now as she is getting older, because she is going to middle school next year, and she's going to have, not just one teacher, she's going to have a multitude of teachers. So for her to explaining her tics to her educators and to friends, that's inclusion. It comes from both knowledge and kindness of, her advocating for herself and using her voice and courage to educate others, ultimately creating inclusion. In the equity gaps for students with disabilities was one of the articles I use. So equity isn't about every child being treated the same. It's about giving them what they need to thrive. In that article, PAC helped me understand that emotional support, flexible educators, and safe environments are part of equity too. My daughter needed support before she had a diagnosis, and kind of, this article validates that experience. Our daughter has no like 504 formal plan, but she receives, informal accommodation. So for her, even though they don't see it, we know she struggles inside, which is one of my, what my husband had talked to me about when I was interviewing him, some days, with Tourette's, and when she tics, you don't always see it, she can go a day without ticking. So it's just, that's why equity must account for the invisible, because you don't know how maybe she wants to tick and she doesn't tick because she is fighting with her brain to fight the urge, that's kind of to validate, her experience and what she's going through, So for the Axis of Evidence Family, Life Goes On, Disability in Contemporary Families was the best article I can relate this to. In that article, it talks about, how Axis involves emotional, social, and sensory accommodations. As we talked about, it's just more, it's in our discussions, in our modules, it's more than just ramps or tech tools. What it looks like for my daughter is bliss. She's able to access having flexible routines at school or at home. Sometimes sensory breaks, when they're having an assembly, if it's too loud or she's feeling overstimulated, her tics will kind of peak up. Then, she could ask to be, stepped out of the room for her needs, or she could ask to bring a fidget with her, which helps also her quite a bit, actually, fight the urge to tick, as long as she's, speaking up for herself and letting her know, hey, I know we have an assembly today, but I feel like, if just in case, can I bring my fidgets, just in case I have a tick. Definitely also too, when she needs a day to regroup. So I know she has a tummy tick that really bothers her, and it kind of affects her even from going to school, ultimately to say her tics get the better of her. There's days where she doesn't want to go to school because of her tics, or her Tourette's. So, sometimes we just, have to say, hey, let's just stay home today. And, we vote, we advocated for her, we'll reach out to the teachers and say, hey, this is the kind of day we're having, and sometimes we kind of have to push her to go to school, because when she's at school and not thinking of her tummy tick, it goes away. It's a battle, that's for sure. I don't want to send her to school feeling the way she is, but I also want her to know that she is strong and she can always fight that urge. And some days we're like, hey, it's okay, just stay home. But we are definitely learning how to adapt both at home and in school. Okay, so now I want to know, my biggest thing is what resources are available for families in early diagnosis stages. Like, I feel like when our daughter was diagnosed, we were just handed a piece of paper and said, hey, your daughter has Tourette's. Nothing more of it. Unfortunately, our neurologist was let go. We have yet to find a new neurologist. And it's also a lengthy process to find neurologists and actually get in and be seen. All what was told was us is, hey, your daughter has Tourette's, and if they get worse, come back and see us. We can prescribe medication. I felt like we were left on a stranded island. We were stranded on an island alone, knowing our daughter's diagnosis. Um, it'd been helpful to learn, like, we found this out on ourselves, but Tourette's is something that kind of gets worse as you age, or it can kind of cure up in a way. Like, it won't be as bad. They could get worse or bad as they get older. Ultimately, sometimes they end before when they turn 18. A lot of this, I feel like a lot of learning about her diagnosis was online, reading forums, finding Facebook groups. So if there was just a good resource available for parents with children of Tourette's, and I think it ultimately also leads up to, like, the neurologists who we were with, stuff like that. But, it's just a little more resource available for families. So that way we can, I want to do what's best for her and also keep her educated too, because if the Tourette's is something that is lifelong for her, I want her to be advocating for herself, whether it's at work, school, just down the line. My question for you all, if you all made it this long, what have you learned during the semester about making inclusion real, let's say in your school, place of employment, or at home? And then how can we support each other in celebrating differences? Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for bearing with me. I know there's some technical things I need to work out, but I appreciate it. Also, too, if you have any other questions about Tourette's or about my daughter or about our family's lifestyle, please ask me. I love to talk about my family and our journey during this. I could say that my daughter is thriving. She is owning her disability, and we couldn't be more proud of her. Thank you all. Have a great day.